You and your kid aren't cute at all. Get out of my house. Those were the words that shattered my illusion of family. It wasn't just my mother-in-law throwing me out. It was my husband, standing silent beside her, choosing her over us. I left with nothing but my child and a quiet promise. I would never let anyone make us feel small again. What came next? Revenge, resilience, and reckoning no one saw coming. My name is Lisa. I'm 34 years old. And if you met me 2 years ago, I might have told you I had the perfect life. A stable job as an office worker, a loving husband named Mark, and a beautiful baby girl who made every sleepless night worth it. Mark and I met on a dating app, swiped right, chatted for hours, and met over lattes that turned cold while we talked about our future, like we were scripting a movie. He was kind and attentive. The kind of man who planned candlelit dinners on rainy nights and brought me soup when I had a cold. When our daughter was born, he didn't flinch from dirty diapers or midnight feedings. I thought, this is it, I found my forever. But I was wrong. Not immediately, not in some dramatic, flashing red lights kind of way. No. The unraveling was slow, like a thread coming loose from a favorite sweater. At first, you ignore it. Then it's impossible not to see it. Started with food. Dinner's good, Mark would say, chewing slowly. But my mom's is richer, you know. The first time, I smiled. The second time, I laughed nervously. By the 10th time, I stopped asking him how it tasted. Then came the souvenirs. Every trip, he'd ask, what should I get my mom? Not my parents, not even our daughter. Always his mom. Still, I told myself he was just a family man. It's sweet, right? A man who loves his mother. One evening, while folding laundry, Mark said something that made me freeze. I think we should move in with my mom. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. What? Why? He didn't laugh. My parents are getting divorced. Dad cheated. I dropped the baby onesie in my hand. What? Your dad? Mark nodded solemnly. I can't leave mom alone. And she can. Help with the baby. You'd get to go back to work earlier. It's a win-win. I hesitated. My parents were falling apart. Dad's midlife crisis had torn our home into cold silences. I understood what family duty looked like, and when Mark promised his mother liked me, I agreed. That was the first domino. We moved in a month later into a well-lit apartment near the city center. Big windows, clean kitchen, 3 bedrooms. It could have been perfect. Except that from the very first morning, I knew I was no longer the woman of the house. This apartment's too nice for you. She sneered while sipping her tea like royalty. Her name was Margaret, but she insisted I call her mom. I blinked. Excuse me, you only have this life because of my son, she snapped. Don't get comfortable. I forced a smile. Mark works hard. I'm grateful. Inside, I felt the first real crack. Her comments were relentless. Like a steady dripping faucet that erodes the sink one day at a time. Soy sauce on eggs. Barbaric. Use ketchup. This bathwater is weak. Boil it next time. Where's my afterbath ice cream? You should know by now. She didn't work. She didn't clean. She didn't cook. But she ran the house like she owned every square inch. Mark. He was blind to it. At dinner, he'd ask how her day was and rub her shoulders while she gushed about the 5 minutes she spent playing peekaboo with our daughter. I was a ghost, a maid, a body with no voice. Still, I endured. Because marriage is about compromise. Right? I enrolled my daughter in daycare and went back to work. It was the only way I could hold on to a sliver of my identity. When I told Margaret I was returning to the office, she scoffed. Why do you need to work? You'll have the house to yourself. Exactly, I replied with a smile. Peace. That shut her up. For a while, but the house was never quiet. Margaret's demands were endless. And, Mark? He was slipping further and further into her shadow. I remember one night like a slap to the face. Mark had just come home from work. How was your day? I asked, wiping baby food from our daughter's chin. He sighed. Rough. My boss is stressing about deadlines. Oh no, I said sympathetically. But Margaret gasped like someone had died. That's workplace harassment. Should I call your CEO? Mark blinked. Mom, it's just a bad day. My angel is too forgiving, she cooed, running her hand through his hair like he was 5 years old. I nearly dropped the baby spoon. Angel, he's a 34-year-old man who still lets his mother fight his battles. It was then I knew. I didn't have a husband. I had a roommate with Oedipal issues. Still, I stayed. For my daughter. For hope, but hope began to rot. The final straw came on my daughter's 2nd birthday. We threw a small party. Just family. Cake, balloons, laughter. So I hoped. Margaret stormed in, wearing a pink dress too young for her and a necklace that jangled like chains. She shoved a glittery gift box toward my toddler. Open it, sweetie. My daughter frowned. No. Margaret's lips twitched. Come on, look. Strawberry cake. No. My daughter said again, smacking the spoon away. A glob of cream hit Margaret square on the forehead. She snapped. You brat. This is why I hate spoiled kids. My daughter burst into tears. Her tiny body trembled as I scooped her into my arms. She's 2, you psycho. Ugh, worst grandchild ever. She spat. That's when something in me cracked and, not in a way that could be glued back together. Says the woman who throws tantrums over bathwater. I hissed. Her face turned an unholy shade of purple. What did you say? You heard me. Pack your bags. You're moving out today. Mark finally stood, his eyes darting between us like a rabbit in headlights. Babe, wait, no, I said. She crossed the line. You're a disgrace of a daughter-in-law, Margaret screeched. And you're a monster of a Mark swallowed hard. Mom's right. You're overreacting. My heart stuttered. Our daughter is crying, and you're defending her. He shrugged. We can have another kid. I only have one mother. The room went dead silent. I stared at him like I'd never seen him before. And in that moment, I hadn't. He wasn't the man who held my hand at the altar. He wasn't the man who cut our daughter's umbilical cord. He was someone else. Someone spineless. You're disgusting, I whispered. Don't talk to my son like that. Margaret screeched again. Neither of you are welcome here, she added, fire in her voice. And then it hit me. She thought this was her house. I looked around. The furniture. The walls. The space I'd cleaned and cooked in and made a home. Smiled. You're right, we're leaving. I picked up my daughter. Mark's mouth fell open. Lisa, wait. Oh, I'm done waiting, I said, grabbing my suitcase. Enjoy your cake date. Margaret smirked like she'd won. But the war had only just begun. The silence in the car was louder than the chaos we left behind. My daughter clutched her bunny plush like it was a lifeboat, and I focused on the road ahead on something, anything, that didn't involve screaming mothers or husbands who acted like sons. We drove to my parents' home. My mom opened the door, her eyes wide when she saw our red faces and hastily packed bags. She didn't ask questions. Just hugged me, hugged her granddaughter, and ushered us inside. That night, I cried silently into my pillow while my daughter slept peacefully beside me. I had left everything, my marriage, my home, my dreams of growing old with someone I once thought was my soulmate, but even as tears soaked my pillow, I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest, relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I didn't have to explain myself to a woman who saw me as a threat. I didn't have to compete. For love I should have been given freely, but I wasn't free. Not yet. The real unraveling had only begun. 3 days later, Mark called. I had ignored 27 missed calls. He finally reached me through a mutual friend who begged me to just hear him out. Hey, Mark said as I answered. His voice was low and cautious, like he was speaking to a ghost. I assume you called about the apartment. Well, yeah, he said, almost relieved. So, it stays with me, right? You left voluntarily. So About that, I interrupted, my voice saccharine. You'll need to start paying rent. 150,000 yen a month. He choked. Are you insane? That's triple the actual amount. Actually, I said, cutting him off again, it's my apartment. Bought it before we met. Stock profits. Surprise. Dead. Silence. I imagined his face slack-jawed, disbelief morphing into panic. You own it? Yep. Pay up or I'll sell it tomorrow. Where will my mom live? He asked, the panic bubbling over. I smiled bitterly. Not my problem. Click. I sat back and stared at the ceiling. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt done. My lawyer handled the rest. Divorce papers were filed the same week. Mark didn't even fight it. Maybe because he was too stunned, or maybe because deep down, he knew he didn't deserve to. But what came next wasn't pace, it was fallout. My lawyer told me that during the first negotiation meeting, Mark looked like a zombie. Emotionless, drenched in confusion and self-pity. Margaret, on the other hand, was livid. You've ruined everything. She reportedly screamed, "This is your fault." Mark yelled back, "No, yours. You let her walk away." Their legendary bond, that ironclad loyalty they wore like armor, shattered the moment real consequences knocked at their door. She blamed him for not controlling me. He blamed her for scaring me away. Neither took responsibility. It was like watching a bad soap opera. Only I wasn't on set anymore. I was watching from the outside, finally free. Weeks passed, then months. I adjusted to single motherhood better than I thought I would. Work welcomed me back full-time. My daughter started giggling more and crying less. And I started to breathe again. But healing isn't linear. There were nights when loneliness knocked so hard I considered calling Mark, not to return just to hear something familiar. But I never did. I knew the moment I allowed his voice back in, I'd be sucked into the same black hole of guilt and excuses. Instead, I poured everything into creating a better life. I sold the apartment for a profit that secured my daughter's college fund. My mom offered us a room, free of judgment. We lived simply, but every square foot of that home was ours. No manipulation. No passive-aggressive sighs over bathwater. Just love and quiet rebuilding. Then came the message. Late one night, as I scrolled mindlessly through my phone, a new email popped up. Subject, "I miss you and her." It was from Mark. I stared at the screen, heart hammering not with longing, but with dread. I clicked it open. "Lisa, I've been thinking a lot. I know I hurt you. I know I wasn't the husband you deserved. Mom's not doing well. She doesn't eat. She cries all the time. I feel like I failed both of you. I just want a chance to explain. I miss her laugh. I miss our family. Please, can we talk?" I sat still for a long time, eyes blurring over. For a brief moment, that fragile part of Mitha, one that remembered the first dates, the newborn sleepless nights we shared, ached. But then I remembered the birthday party. I remembered him saying, "We can have another kid. I only have one mother." I deleted the email. Weeks turned to seasons. Life bloomed. I returned to therapy, not because I was broken, but because I needed to understand how. I allowed myself to shrink for so long. I kept hoping things would go back to how they were. I confessed during one session, but I realize now, that version of Mark never really existed. Or maybe he did, but only when his mother wasn't watching. The therapist nodded. Sometimes, we fall in love with someone's potential. But we can't live in potential, we live in choices. One morning, I woke up to sunshine streaming through the window. My daughter giggling as she tried to put socks on her stuffed rabbit. "Mama, Bunny's feet cold." I laughed, genuinely, and pulled her into my arms. "I think Bunny's lucky to have you." I whispered. So was I, but life still had one more twist for me. It started on a quiet Wednesday. I was picking my daughter up from daycare when I saw a sleek black car parked out front. Mark stepped out. His face was thinner, paler. His eyes had that hollow look people get after months of emotional erosion. "Lisa," he said softly, "can we talk?" Every instinct screamed no, but I owed it to myself to finally hear what he had to say. We met at a coffee shop down the street. Neutral ground. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he began. "I know that's over." I raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" "To apologize, and to explain." I said nothing. Just waited. "She left," he said. I blinked. "Who?" "My mom. She moved to live with her sister in the countryside. Said the city reminded her too much of what she lost." I resisted the urge to laugh. "After you left, I tried to keep things together, but it fell apart fast." The house felt haunted. Every corner echoed. He looked down at his hands. "I didn't defend you because I thought she'd always be there. I never imagined losing her. Or you." "You didn't lose me," I said. "You gave me away." He nodded. "I know." A long silence stretched between us. "Thank you," I finally said, "for the apology, but I'm not looking back." He smiled faintly. I figured, I just needed to say it. And then he left. That night, I sat on the balcony watching the stars with my daughter curled up beside me. There was no dramatic music, no epiphany, just peace, real peace. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe I'd fall in love again someday. Maybe I wouldn't. But I knew this, I'd never settle again. I'd never let love be a cage dressed up as comfort. And I'd raise my daughter to know that real love doesn't ask you to become small. Because strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just quietly walks away and never looks back. Great. Let's move into the emotional and dramatic high point of the story. Freedom felt strange. Wasn't used to waking up without dread clinging to my chest. I wasn't used to mornings where no one barked orders about bathwater, or made me feel invisible in my own home. But more than anything, I wasn't used to silence being peaceful. It took time for my nervous system to stop expecting a crisis. Even after months away from that apartment, I would catch myself flinching when the phone rang. Or bracing for guilt when I picked up takeout instead of cooking a full dinner. But little by little, I was stitching myself back together. I watched my daughter thrive. Her laughter came easier, louder. She no longer startled at raised voices or hid behind me when someone new approached. That's when I realized just how much she had absorbed in that toxic house. She was only two, but children know. They always know. And in a way, that crushed me more than anything Mark or his mother had said. So I poured everything into building a life that felt like ours. And for a while, it worked until she returned. It started with a knock on the door. I was setting the table for dinner when my mom answered it. Her voice turned stiff, brittle. "Lisa," she called. "You have a visitor." I stepped into the hallway, my heart already pounding. And there she was, Margaret, wearing a beige coat, pearl earrings, and a face scrubbed raw of makeup. The woman who once screamed that my child was the worst grandchild ever now looked small. "Hi," she said, clutching her purse. "May I speak with you? Just for a moment." I didn't move. My first instinct was to slam the door shut. But something in her eyes, some tremor, some crack in the mask made me pause. We stepped outside, into the chill of the evening. "I won't keep you long," she began. I wanted to say I'm sorry." I laughed. I didn't mean to, but it escaped before I could stop it. She flinched. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I want you to know. I've lost everything." "You threw away everything," I corrected. She nodded. "You're right." We stood in silence. Then she added, "I lost my home. Mark couldn't afford the rent. I moved in with my sister, but I can't stop thinking about how I treated you and her." "My daughter," I said, voice sharp. "Say her name." She looked down. "I'm sorry, Lisa. I was proud, controlling. I thought if I kept Mark close, he'd never abandon me. I was wrong. I hurt him, I hurt you, I wanted to say that out loud. It should have satisfied me. It didn't. You humiliated me," I whispered. "You screamed in my child's face. You told me I wasn't good enough for the man I gave everything to." Tears welled in her eyes. "I know. Do you?" I snapped. "Or are you just lonely now that the empire you built is gone?" She covered her face with trembling hands. "I miss her. I know I don't deserve to, but I do." I felt the anger reascend, then strangely fade. I wasn't going to forgive her. Not tonight, maybe not ever. But I didn't hate her anymore. Because she had to live with herself now, and that was enough. The next day, Mark called again. "I heard Mom came by." I didn't answer. He sighed. "I didn't ask her to. She just does things. You still can't control her," I muttered. "I'm not calling to ask for another chance," he said. I've been thinking about you. About us." "Mark," I interrupted. "You told me I was replaceable. You told me we could have another kid." "I didn't mean it," he said quickly. I panicked. I was scared she'd break down without me. "And you let me break instead." "Silence. I never stopped loving you," he said quietly. "I don't care," I replied, and hung up. I wish I could say that was the end. But real life isn't that tidy. 2 weeks later, I found out through a friend that Mark was dating again. Her name was Iko Young. Fresh out of grad school, bright-eyed, naive. I should have felt angry. I didn't. I felt pity, because I knew the cycle. I knew how charming Mark could be at first. How he'd make her feel seen, special. How she'd mistake his quiet nature for sensitivity instead of cowardice. I hoped deeply that he'd learned. That he'd become a better man. But some lessons can't be taught unless you lose everything. It wasn't until one rainy night, months later, that the real breaking point came. I was heading home with my daughter when I saw someone sitting at the bus stop near our street, soaked, still, motionless. It was Mark. I slowed. My daughter looked up at me, her eyes curious. "Who's that, Mama?" "Someone I used to know," I said quietly. I considered driving past, but I pulled over. He looked up, blinking through the rain. Shocked. "Lisa, what are you doing out here?" I asked, not bothering to hide my frustration. He stood up slowly. "I didn't know where else to go." "Go home." "I don't have one." My stomach twisted. "Iko left," he said. "Turns out she didn't like sharing me with ghosts." "You mean your mother?" "She moved again," he muttered. Cut me off completely this time, said I disappointed her. There it was. The end of the illusion. He had sacrificed everything to keep his mother's love and ended up with neither wife nor mother nor future. I just needed to see you one last time, he said, voice barely audible. Why? I asked. To say, I get it now. Everything. What I did. What I failed to do. Tears mixed with rain on his face. I wish I could undo it. But I know I can't. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I got back into the car and rolled down the window. I hope you get the help you need, Mark. He nodded. I drove away. He didn't follow. Later that night, I tucked my daughter into bed. She looked up at me with sleepy eyes. Mama. Yes, baby. Why was the sad man in the rain? Kissed her forehead, because sometimes people don't know what they've lost until it's too late. She nodded. I won't be like him. And in that moment, I knew. I had broken the cycle. The price of control. Where the emotional threads close, the suspense is finally resolved, and Lisa's future is sealed. Or, if you'd like any edits to this part first, I can adjust it before moving on. Amazing, let's bring your story to a powerful, emotional, and suspenseful close. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with silence. The kind that only comes after a long storm finally passes. Months had passed since the night I saw Mark drenched in rain, looking like the ghost of the man I once loved. I hadn't heard from him since, and I wasn't waiting anymore. The real ending wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. And for once, I welcomed that. I focused on building a new rhythm. Not a recovery arc or some dramatic reinventions, just life. Steady and solid. I was finally promoted at work, not because I asked for sympathy, but because I earned it. I built a morning routine with my daughter, cartoons, cereal, and morning dance parties. We had movie nights with popcorn and nail painting sessions where she colored more skin than nails. And best of all, I started laughing again, not polite laughter. Not laughter meant to keep the peace. Real, belly-deep joy, and that joy invited something I hadn't expected. Someone. It began at a birthday party. My daughter's classmate turned 3, and every parent was roped into staying to supervise. I didn't mind. It gave me a reason to speak to people instead of just nodding in carpool lines. There was one father I hadn't seen before. Tall, quiet, but warm. His name was Haruto. His daughter, Mia, was shy, like mine. But when they sat together coloring paper crowns, they giggled like old friends. You've raised a gentle girl, he said to me while we sipped lukewarm tea. I blinked. Thank you. That's rare to hear. You can tell by how they treat others, he said. It means someone taught her how. I don't know why that stuck with me for days after. Maybe because it wasn't about how she looked, or behaved for adults, but who she was becoming. Someone kind. Someone strong. Over time, we ran into each other more. At school drop-offs, at the park, at the grocery store. And, slowly, cautiously, we started sharing real things. Not just smiles, but memories. He was widowed. I was divorced. Both of us had battle scars, but neither of us wore them like armor. He didn't rush things. He didn't push for dates or pretend to be a hero. He just showed up steadily, kindly, the opposite of Mark in every possible way. But I was cautious. So cautious. So when he asked me out, I hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready, I said honestly. He nodded. I understand. Lisa, I'm moving overseas. I accepted a job transfer. I just wanted to say I wish I'd been different. I wish I'd fought for you instead of hiding behind my mother. She's in a nursing facility now. We barely speak. You were the best thing I ever deserved. I was sure that would be the end of it. But the next day, he waved at my daughter, like always. And the next week, he dropped off a forgotten lunchbox we left at the park. No pressure, no manipulation, just presence, and that's what finally made me say yes. The first date was simple, a small restaurant near the beach. Light pasta, soft music, warm smiles. No confessions of love. No expectations. Just space to breathe. In the end, he didn't lean in to kiss me. Instead, he said, "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." And, for the first time in a long time, I believed someone meant it. A year passed, a good year. My daughter blossomed in school. I watched her grow bold, expressive, and silly. She once climbed onto the dinner table and belted a made-up song called "Mommy is a Warrior" while waving a spaghetti spoon like a sword. I cried. I laughed. I lived, and slowly Haruto became part of that life. Not a replacement. Not a fixer. Just someone who saw us clearly and stayed one day. I received a letter, no return address. Inside was a short, handwritten note. Mark asterisk, I read it twice. Then, folded it up and dropped it in the shredder. I felt nothing, not hate, not joy, just nothing. And that was the most peaceful feeling in the world. On the second anniversary of my divorce, I took my daughter to the ocean. We wrote messages in the sand and watched the tide take them away. She turned to me and asked, "Mommy, what did your message say?" I smiled. It said, "Thank you for letting me go." She tilted her head. "Who are you talking to?" "My past." She looked at her message. "I love you, Mommy plus Mia plus Bunny forever." I laughed. "That's a good one." Then, she added, "And maybe her." My heart swelled. Yeah, maybe him too. That night, Haruto joined us for dinner. After my daughter went to bed, we sat on the porch, the sky stretching wide above us. "I want to tell you something," I said quietly. Okay, I was afraid of becoming my mother-in-law. He looked at me, brows raised. "You could never." "I mean it," I said. She controlled everyone, guilted people into loving her. I swore I'd never be like that, but for a while, I didn't know who I was without someone else's approval. He reached out and gently held my hand. "You're nothing like her, Lisa. You walked away. You protected your daughter. That's strength." I swallowed hard. I want to raise her right. I want her to know that love doesn't come with chains. "And she will," he said. "Because you showed her how." Sometimes, I think back to the apartment, to the birthday party, to the moment I realized I was more alone in a full room than I'd ever been in silence. And I'm grateful for it, because if Margaret hadn't pushed me out, if Mark hadn't revealed the truth of who he was, if I hadn't walked away, trembling but determined, I never would have found this version of my life. A life of peace, purpose, and power. And above all else, a life where love doesn't control, it frees.